The snow was falling in thick flakes when I pulled up to grandmother's Victorian house on Christmas Eve. I sat in my rental car, watching warm light spill from the windows onto the white-covered lawn. 25 cars lined the street. The entire Mercer clan had gathered, just like every year, just like the 15 years I had spent watching from the margins. I checked my reflection in the rear-view mirror. Simple black dress, pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother, no elaborate makeup. I had learned long ago that there was no point trying to impress people who had already decided I was worthless. Her chair would be empty this year. Grandmother was in the memory care facility now, the one I had been paying for secretly since the costs exceeded what Medicare would cover. But the family did not know that. They did not know a lot of things. The door opened before I could knock. My stepmother Diane stood there in a red cashmere sweater, her smile freezing for just a fraction of a second when she saw me. "Elaine, you came," she said it like noting the arrival of an unexpected pest. "We were not sure you would bother this year." "Merry Christmas, Diane." She stepped aside just enough to let me pass. The living room opened up before me, and I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. The Christmas tree dominated the space, stretching nearly to the ceiling. But it was not the tree that made my stomach clench. It was what surrounded it. Gifts, mountains of them, wrapped in gold and silver paper, stacked in organized clusters with name tags visible. Bradley, Sophia, the grandchildren, the cousins. I scanned the clusters automatically, the way I had been doing since I was 13 years old. There was no stack for me. There never was. My father spotted me from across the room, holding court near the fireplace with bourbon in hand. Richard Mercer, 64 years old, retired insurance executive, self-appointed patriarch. He looked at me the way a king might look at a servant who had wandered into the throne room. "Well, well, look who decided to grace us with her presence." His voice carried, ensuring everyone heard. 25 heads turned toward me. "Still playing sailor, Elaine, or did you finally get a real job?" The laughter that rippled through the room was familiar. I had heard it at graduations I attended alone, at holidays where my place setting mysteriously disappeared. "The Navy is a real job, Dad." My half-brother Bradley appeared at my father's side, smirking. "Golden child, Harvard Law. The Navy is basically government daycare with boats. You sit around waiting for wars that never happen while the rest of us actually contribute to society." I said nothing. Silence was my best defense in this house. Aunt Patricia leaned toward my cousin's wife and stage-whispered loud enough for me to hear. "It is just so sad. She had such potential and threw it all away to play soldier. Some children just refuse to amount to anything." The gift exchange began shortly after. I stood against the wall watching my father play Santa Claus, calling out names. Bradley received a new Rolex. Sophia got diamond earrings. The children shrieked with delight over electronics. Even cousins I had not seen in years received thoughtful presents. My name was never called. A small hand tugged at my dress. My cousin's daughter, maybe 6 years old, stared up at me with confusion. "How come you did not get any presents, Aunt Elaine?" The room went quiet. My father became very interested in his bourbon. Diane examined her manicure. I knelt down and smiled. "That is a good question, sweetheart." I did not answer it. Some truths are too ugly to explain to a child. But in my mind, a phrase I had carried for 15 years surfaced like a life raft. 15 Christmases of silence taught me that actions speak louder than wrapped packages. I had repeated it on deployments in the Pacific, during lonely holidays on aircraft carriers, in quiet moments when I wondered if I would ever stop caring about approval that would never come. My gaze drifted to the empty chair by the window, grandmother's chair. The one person who had ever looked at me with pride was not here. She was in a facility, probably alone tonight, while her family celebrated without her. Just like me. I straightened up and smoothed my dress. The little girl had already scampered off to play with her new toys. No one acknowledged what had just happened. In this family, my exclusion was so normalized that pointing it out was considered poor taste. I checked my watch, 7:43. The evening was just beginning. Standing there watching wrapping paper pile up like colorful debris, I found myself drifting backward through time. The memories came unbidden, the way they always did in this house. Every corner held a ghost. Every room whispered reminders of the girl I used to be and the woman they refused to see. I was 10 years old when my mother died. Cancer took her in the autumn, when the leaves were falling and the world was preparing to go cold. I remember standing at her bedside in those final hours, holding her hand while she told me to be brave, to be strong, to never let anyone diminish my light. My father stood in the corner of the room, already distant, already somewhere else in his mind. I think part of him died with her, the part that knew how to love me. He remarried within a year. Deanne was everything my mother was not, polished where my mother was warm, calculating where my mother was genuine. She came with 2 children from her previous marriage, Bradley and Sophia, and suddenly I was no longer the daughter of the house. I was the inconvenient reminder of a wife my father wanted to forget. The first Christmas without my mother, I woke up excited despite my grief. Christmas had always been magical in our house. My mother made sure of it. I ran downstairs expecting to find my stocking filled, expecting to see presents with my name on them beneath the tree. Instead, I found Bradley and Sophia surrounded by mountains of gifts while a single small package waited for me. A pair of socks. Hand-me-down socks from a cousin, rewrapped. When I asked my father why, he barely looked up from his coffee. "Money is tight, Elaine. We had to prioritize, you understand." But there was nothing tight about the gaming system Bradley received or the designer clothes piled around Sophia. I was 13 years old, and I understood perfectly. I just did not have words for it yet. The pattern repeated every year, every birthday, every holiday. I learned to expect nothing so that nothing could disappoint me. I learned to make myself small and quiet, hoping that invisibility might protect me from the constant reminders that I did not belong. My father controlled the narrative in this family with surgical precision. At every gathering, he would share updates about his children. Bradley made the honor roll. Sophia was accepted into a prestigious program. But when relatives asked about me, his face would tighten with practiced disappointment. "Elaine is struggling," he would say. "She has difficulty applying herself. We are doing everything we can, but some children simply refuse to reach their potential." It was a lie. I was a straight-A student. I was captain of the debate team. I won a statewide essay competition my junior year. But none of that fit his narrative, so none of it was ever mentioned. In the Mercer family mythology, I was the failure, and my father was the long-suffering patriarch who had tried his best with a difficult child. I was 17 when I announced my decision to enlist in the Navy. I had researched it for months, filled out the paperwork in secret, dreamed of a life where my value would be determined by my actions rather than my father's approval. I waited until dinner to tell them, hoping that the presence of Bradley and Sophia might temper my father's reaction. I was wrong. "You are throwing your life away." He did not yell. My father never yelled. His voice went cold and flat, which was somehow worse. "The military is for people who cannot succeed anywhere else. People who need someone to tell them what to do because they are incapable of thinking for themselves. I want to serve my country. I want to do something meaningful." "Meaningful?" He laughed without humor. "You want to play soldier because you are too lazy to get a real education like your brother and sister. Do not expect my support, Elaine. Do not expect a single dollar from me. When you come crawling back in 2 years, broken and directionless, do not expect me to say I told you so. I will simply close the door." He never said he was proud of me. Not once. Not when I was accepted into the Naval Academy. Not when I graduated top of my class at 22. I called him that day, foolishly hoping that the achievement might finally break through his contempt. He answered on the 4th ring. "Dad, I graduated. Top of my class. I am being commissioned as an officer." The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. "Anyone can march around in a uniform, Elaine. Call me when you accomplish something that actually matters." He hung up. I stood there in my dress whites, surrounded by classmates and their families, their proud parents taking photographs and wiping tears. I had no one. I found a quiet corner and let myself cry for exactly 2 minutes. Then I dried my eyes, lifted my chin, and made a decision that would define the next decade of my life. I stopped telling them. Every promotion, every commendation, every milestone passed in silence as far as my family was concerned. When I received my first command at 28, leading a destroyer escort in the Pacific Fleet, I did not call home. When I was selected for advanced leadership training, I did not mention it. When I became the youngest female officer in Navy history to command an aircraft carrier strike group, I simply let them continue believing I was a failure. It was easier that way. And honestly, there was a small, petty part of me that enjoyed knowing the truth they refused to see. Every time my father called me a disappointment, I thought about the thousands of sailors under my command who trusted me with their lives. Every time Bradley mocked my career, I thought about the joint naval operations I had led across 3 oceans, the humanitarian missions that saved thousands of lives after the Pacific tsunami, the Distinguished Service Medal locked in my safe at home. The last Christmas I attended, 8 years ago, I arrived hoping things might have changed. Grandmother was still healthy then, still fighting my corner whenever she could. She had saved me a seat next to her, and for a few hours I felt almost welcome. Then dinner was served, and I discovered that Diane had forgotten to set a place for me. "Oh my goodness, how embarrassing," she said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "I must have miscounted. Here, take my seat, I will eat in the kitchen." She did not eat in the kitchen. She made a show of squeezing a chair between Bradley and Sophia, laughing about how silly she was, while I sat alone at the corner of the table with a plate balanced on my knees. Grandmother tried to protest, but my father silenced her with a look. "Mother, please, it was an honest mistake. Elaine does not mind. Do you, Elaine?" I said I did not mind. I finished my meal in silence and left before dessert. In the car, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white and made myself a promise. I would never again subject myself to their cruelty. I would build a life so full of purpose and meaning that their rejection would become irrelevant. And I did. God help me, I did. The years passed in a blur of deployments and commands, of endless oceans and the quiet satisfaction of serving something greater than myself. I made Admiral at 36. Rear Admiral lower half, 2 stars, one of the youngest in the Navy's history. The ceremony was attended by senators and admirals and the Secretary of the Navy himself. My family was not invited. They would not have come anyway. But I never forgot grandmother. Even as her memory began to fade, even as the family moved her into a facility and started treating her like a burden, I visited whenever I could. I came in civilian clothes, never mentioning my rank, letting her believe I was still the granddaughter she remembered. Sometimes she knew me, sometimes she did not, but she always smiled when I walked through the door. When I discovered that the facility costs were exceeding what the family was willing to pay, I set up an anonymous fund to cover everything. The best doctors, the best care, around-the-clock attention. My father believed he was handling the finances, accepting the reduced bills without question. He never wondered why the costs suddenly became manageable. He never investigated. He simply took credit for being a good son while his mother was kept comfortable by the granddaughter he had discarded. 4 years of secret support. 4 years of ensuring that the one person who had ever loved me unconditionally would want for nothing. 4 years of actions speaking louder than any words I could have said. Now I stood in her empty chair's shadow, watching her family exchange expensive gifts and casual cruelties, and I wondered if she remembered any of us at all. Dinner was announced shortly after the last gift was opened. The family migrated toward the dining room in a wave of cashmere and self-satisfaction, and I followed at a distance, already counting the hours until I could leave. My original plan had been simple. Arrive, endure a few hours, confirm through observation that grandmother's house was being maintained, then slip away to visit her at the facility before driving back to my hotel. No confrontation, no revelation, just closure. But plans have a way of unraveling in this house. The dining room table was set for 24. Diane had not forgotten a place setting this time, though mine was positioned at the far end, squeezed between 2 cousins I barely knew. I took my seat without comment, watching as my father claimed the head of the table like a throne. The meal proceeded in the usual fashion. Stories were shared, all of them centering on Bradley's legal victories or Sophia's medical accomplishments. Wine flowed freely. Laughter erupted at jokes I was not included in. I ate in silence, responding politely when directly addressed, otherwise invisible. It was during dessert that the conversation turned to grandmother. Sophia set down her fork and adopted the concerned expression she used when discussing difficult patients. I visited Mom last week. She did not recognize me at all. The nurses say she has good days and bad days, but honestly, I think we need to start preparing ourselves. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. Aunt Patricia dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. My father nodded gravely. She probably will not make it to next Christmas, Sophia continued. Her decline has been rapid this past year. The facility is doing what they can, but there is only so much medicine can do at her age. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I had visited grandmother 3 weeks ago during a brief leave. She had been frail but stable, her smile still warm when she saw me even if she called me by my mother's name. The facility had assured me her condition was manageable. But listening to Sophia speak, you would think she was already gone. The real question, my father said, swirling his wine, is what we do about her care costs going forward. The facility is expensive. I have been covering most of it, but it is becoming a significant burden on my retirement. I kept my face neutral, but inside, a spark of anger ignited. He had been covering most of it. The lie was so casual, so effortless. He genuinely believed it, probably because the bills that reached him were small enough to seem reasonable. He had no idea that someone else was paying the difference. Diane leaned forward with the expression of someone about to deliver bad news compassionately. Richard and I have been discussing this. The house is sitting empty. Eleanor is never coming back to it. Selling it would cover her care costs for however long she has left, and the remainder could be distributed among the family. That makes sense, Bradley said immediately. From a legal standpoint, we should probably start that process sooner rather than later. Property values in this neighborhood are strong right now. Aunt Patricia nodded eagerly. Eleanor would not want to be a burden. She always said that. She would want us to be practical. I listened to them divide up my grandmother's life with the efficiency of estate lawyers. The house where she had raised her children, where my mother had grown up, where I had found refuge during the darkest years of my childhood, reduced to a line item in their financial planning. Not once did anyone mention visiting her. Not once did anyone suggest that her remaining time might have value beyond its cost. Something cracked inside me. The careful wall I had built between my two lives developed a fracture I could not ignore. Who exactly has been paying for grandmother's care? My voice cut through the conversation like a blade. Heads turned. My father's eyebrows rose at the interruption. I told you, Elaine, I have been handling it. Handling it how? The facility she is in costs over $12,000 a month. Her Medicare covers less than half. Who has been paying the difference for the past 4 years? My father's expression flickered. Irritation at being questioned, followed by the dismissive confidence of a man who had never been held accountable for anything. I set up a payment arrangement. The details are not your concern. This is family business. I am family. Are you? His voice carried a familiar edge. You disappear for years at a time, playing soldier on your boats, and now you want to insert yourself into decisions. When was the last time you even visited her? 3 weeks ago, I thought, and 6 weeks before that, and every month for the past 4 years, flying in from wherever the Navy stationed me, sitting by her bedside while she drifted between memory and forgetting. More recently than you might think. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I glanced at the screen. A text from Margaret Chen, my attorney, who was parked 2 blocks away as planned. Arrived, ready when you are. I had not intended for tonight to unfold this way. Margaret was here as a precaution, carrying documents related to the trust I had established for grandmother's care. My original plan was to review the paperwork with her after dinner, make some adjustments to the trust's terms, then return to my life without anyone being the wiser. But sitting here listening to them lie about supporting grandmother while planning to sell her home, something shifted. The protective silence I had maintained for 15 years suddenly felt less like dignity and more like complicity. By saying nothing, I had allowed them to construct a reality where they were the heroes and I was the disappointment. By hiding my success, I had given them permission to diminish me. Grandmother deserved better. She deserved to have someone speak the truth in her defense. And maybe, after all these years, so did I. I excused myself from the table. I need to take a call. My father waved dismissively, already returning to his conversation with Bradley about property values and inheritance strategies. No one watched me leave. No one ever did. The cold air on the front porch hit my lungs like purification. I stood there for a moment, letting the snow settle on my shoulders, feeling the weight of the decision before me. The black SUV idled 2 houses down, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Margaret was waiting. I walked down the steps and through the gate, my heels leaving prints in the fresh snow. The SUV's window rolled down as I approached. Margaret Chen was a formidable woman, a former Navy JAG officer who had transitioned to private practice specializing in estate law and military benefits. She had handled my affairs for years with discretion and precision. Tonight, she wore a tailored black coat and an expression of patient readiness. "Admiral, everything all right?" I leaned against the car door, looking back at the warm windows of my grandmother's house. Inside, my family was probably still discussing how to divide up her assets. They had no idea what was coming. Neither, if I was being honest, did I. "Change of plans, Margaret. I need you to come inside." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "You want to reveal the trust arrangements? Tonight." "I want to reveal everything." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I will need about 20 minutes to coordinate. Your aide has been on standby at the hotel. If we are doing this, we should do it properly." I had not intended to involve Lieutenant Commander Torres. He was in town only because admirals do not travel without staff, even on personal leave. But Margaret was right. If I was going to end 15 years of silence, I might as well make it count. "Make the call." I returned inside to wait, my heart beating with a rhythm I had not felt since my first combat deployment. The calm before engagement. The moment when all the planning gives way to action. 15 years of being invisible ends tonight. I slipped back into the dining room as quietly as I had left. The conversation had moved on from grandmother's finances to Bradley's latest case, some corporate merger that had earned him a substantial bonus. He was explaining the intricacies of the deal to anyone who would listen, his voice carrying the particular smugness of someone who believed his accomplishments were the most interesting thing in any room. No one acknowledged my return. I took my seat at the end of the table and folded my hands in my lap, settling into the patience that 2 decades of naval service had taught me. Waiting was something I understood. I had waited through storms in the Pacific that lasted days. I had waited for intelligence reports that would determine whether my sailors lived or died. I had waited through diplomatic standoffs and humanitarian crises and the endless bureaucratic machinery of military command. I could wait 20 minutes for my life to change. Something must have shifted in my demeanor, though, because my cousin Rachel glanced at me with a curious expression. "You okay, Elaine? You look different." "I am fine, just needed some air." "It is freezing out there." "I know, it felt good." She gave me an odd look but did not press further. Rachel had always been one of the more tolerable members of the extended family. She had never actively participated in my exclusion, though she had never challenged it either. Complicity through silence, the Mercer family specialty. The meal wound down as coffee and desserts made their rounds. I declined both, keeping my attention split between the conversation and the window overlooking the front yard. 20 minutes, Margaret had said. The SUVs would arrive soon. My father pushed back from the table with the satisfied air of a man who had eaten well and dominated every conversation. "Shall we move to the living room? I believe there is more wine, and Bradley was going to show us the new app his firm developed." The family began migrating toward the living room, carrying glasses and plates, chattering about nothing consequential. I remained seated for a moment longer, watching them go. These people who shared my blood but had never shared their hearts. These strangers who wore family like a costume, performing closeness while practicing cruelty. I rose and followed, choosing a position near the window where I could observe both the room and the street outside. The snow was falling heavier now, large flakes drifting through the glow of the streetlights. Beautiful, peaceful, a stark contrast to what was about to happen inside. Bradley had connected his phone to the television and was walking everyone through some legal technology platform his firm had developed. Most of the family feigned interest. I watched the street. "Elaine seems distracted tonight," Diane observed loudly enough for me to hear. "More than usual, I mean. Is everything all right with your little Navy job, dear?" I turned from the window and met her gaze. "Everything is fine, Diane. Thank you for asking." Something in my tone made her pause. For 15 years, I had responded to her barbs with deflection or silence. Tonight, there was no deflection, no submission, just calm, direct acknowledgement. "You seem different," she said slowly. "Do I?" "More confident, maybe. Did something happen?" I allowed myself a small smile. "Something is about to." Before she could respond, Bradley called out from across the room. "Elaine, you work with computers in the Navy, right? Maybe you can appreciate what we have built here. It is revolutionary for the legal industry." "I work with computers." 4 years of commanding one of the most technologically advanced aircraft carriers in the world, responsible for systems that could track every vessel in a 1,000-mile radius, and my brother thought I worked with computers. "I'm sure it is very impressive, Bradley." He missed the irony entirely. "It really is. We have streamlined the entire discovery process, saved our clients millions in billable hours, and increased your own billable hours in the process, I imagine." His smile faltered slightly. "Well, efficiency has to be profitable. That is just business." "Of course it is." My father was watching me now, his eyes narrowed with something like suspicion. He had built his career reading people, manipulating clients and competitors alike. He sensed the shift in me even if he could not identify its source. "You are being unusually chatty tonight, Elaine. Something on your mind?" "Several things, actually." "Care to share with the class?" His tone was patronizing, inviting laughter from those nearby. "Soon." The single word hung in the air, unexpected. My father was not accustomed to mystery or anticipation from me. He was accustomed to defeat, to withdrawal, to the predictable surrender of a daughter who had learned to expect nothing. Headlights swept across the window, then another set, and another. I watched as 3 black SUVs pulled up to the curb, their government plates visible even through the falling snow. The engines idled, exhaust rising in white plumes against the dark street. "Who is that?" Rachel had noticed the vehicles. "Are those friends of yours, Elaine?" In a manner of speaking. More family members drifted toward the windows, curious about the unusual activity. 3 matching SUVs on a quiet residential street on Christmas Eve was not exactly common. The doors of the middle SUV opened. Margaret Chen emerged first, her black coat stark against the snow. She carried a leather briefcase and walked with the purposeful stride of someone on official business. Behind her, Lieutenant Commander Torres stepped out in his service dress blues, his gold insignia catching the porch light. My father's face shifted from curiosity to confusion. "Is that a military uniform? What is going on here?" I did not answer. I simply waited, my hands clasped behind my back in a posture I had adopted thousands of times on the deck of my ship. Parade rest. The stance of someone who knows exactly what is coming and is prepared to meet it. The doorbell rang. Diane, flustered by the unexpected intrusion, hurried to answer it. Her social hostess instincts kicked in before her suspicion could intervene. Margaret's voice carried from the foyer. "Good evening. I am looking for the family of Rear Admiral Elaine Mercer." The words hit the room like a shockwave. I watched the ripples spread across face after face. Confusion, disbelief, incomprehension. My father's mouth actually fell open, a reaction I had never seen from him in my entire life. "I am sorry," Diane stammered. Did you say Admiral? Rear Admiral, yes. Is this the Mercer residence? I stepped forward, moving from the window toward the foyer. The family parted before me, too stunned to do anything else. 25 people who had spent 15 years dismissing me, and not one of them could form a coherent sentence. Margaret, thank you for coming. I kept my voice calm, professional. The voice I used when addressing my command staff. Everyone, this is Margaret Chen, my attorney, and Lieutenant Commander Torres, my aide-de-camp. Torres snapped to attention the moment he saw me. Admiral on deck, he announced, his voice carrying the weight of military protocol. The room went absolutely silent. Even the children stopped fidgeting, sensing that something important was happening even if they did not understand what. My father found his voice first. This is a joke, some kind of prank. I assure you, Mr. Mercer, this is not a joke. Margaret opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency. I have served as Admiral Mercer's legal counsel for the past 7 years. I am here tonight at her request to clarify certain matters regarding your mother's care. Admiral Mercer. My father repeated the words as if they were in a foreign language. That is not possible. She is a sailor. She drives boats or whatever they do. Torres stiffened at the dismissal but maintained his composure. I appreciated his restraint. He had heard me speak of my family only once, years ago, during a late night on the bridge of the Theodore Roosevelt. I had been vague, but he was a perceptive officer. He understood enough. Dad, I spoke the word quietly, but it silenced the room. I command aircraft carriers. I have led joint naval operations across 3 oceans. I have been responsible for the lives of thousands of sailors and the security of international shipping lanes. I am a Rear Admiral in the United States Navy, and I am one of the youngest officers in history to achieve that rank. I let the words settle over them, like the snow, settling on the lawn outside. I stopped telling you about my career when I was 22 years old, when I graduated top of my class from the Naval Academy, and you told me that anyone can march around in a uniform. I decided then that my accomplishments did not require your approval to be real, so I stopped seeking it. My father's face had gone pale. Deanne clutched her pearls like a lifeline. Bradley looked like someone had pulled the rug out from under his entire worldview. But I was not finished, not even close. I turned to face the full room, meeting the eyes of aunts and uncles and cousins who had spent years whispering about my failures. 15 Christmases of silence taught me that actions speak louder than wrapped packages. I think it is time you all saw my actions. Margaret stepped forward, documents in hand. Perhaps Admiral Mercer would like to change before we proceed with the formal matters. I nodded. Torres moved to the door and signaled to the remaining vehicles. 2 more officers emerged, one carrying a garment bag with reverent care. My dress whites, I explained to no one in particular. If we are going to do this, we should do it properly. I took the garment bag and excused myself to the bathroom where, 15 years ago, I had hidden and cried after my first giftless Christmas. Tonight, I would emerge from that same room transformed. The uniform slid on like armor, like truth, like everything I had earned while they were laughing. The bathroom mirror reflected a woman I had worked my entire adult life to become. I adjusted the collar of my dress whites, ensuring every line was crisp. 2 silver stars gleamed on each shoulder board. Rows of ribbons decorated my chest, each one representing a mission, a sacrifice, a moment when I had been tested and had not broken. The Distinguished Service Medal, the Legion of Merit, the Meritorious Service Medal. A dozen others accumulated over 18 years of service in waters most Americans would never see. I picked up my cover, the white combination cap with gold oak leaves on the visor, and tucked it under my arm. In the reflection, I saw my mother's eyes looking back at me. She would have been proud, I thought. She would have been in the front row at every ceremony. But she was gone, and grandmother was fading, and the family that remained had chosen to make me invisible. Not tonight. I opened the bathroom door and walked toward the living room. My dress shoes clicked against the hardwood with measured cadence. The house had gone quiet. filled only with confused murmurs of people trying to make sense of something beyond their understanding. The living room fell silent when I appeared in the doorway. I stood there for a moment, letting them see me. The simple black dress was gone. In its place was the full ceremonial uniform of a United States Navy Rear Admiral. White jacket with gold buttons, gold shoulder boards with 2 silver stars, ribbons stacked in precise rows, gold aiguillettes draped from my shoulder, marking me as a flag officer of the highest distinction. I was no longer the forgotten daughter. I was the commander of aircraft carriers, the leader of thousands, the woman who had earned every inch of gold braid adorning my sleeves. Lieutenant Commander Torres snapped to attention. Admiral on deck. The words reverberated through the room. Every military member present instinctively straightened. David, my cousin's husband who had served 6 years in the Navy, rose to his feet and executed a textbook salute, his face a mixture of shock and respect. I returned the salute crisply, as you were. David remained standing, staring. You are really an admiral, a real rear admiral. I am. Dear God, he sank back into his seat. I served 6 years and never even saw an admiral in person. They said you never amounted to anything. They said a lot of things. I turned my gaze to my father, who had not moved from his position near the fireplace. His bourbon glass trembled slightly. Most of them were not true. Margaret stepped forward. If I may, Admiral. I nodded. She addressed the room with authority. My name is Margaret Chen. I am an attorney specializing in military affairs and estate law. I have represented Admiral Mercer for 7 years. I am here tonight to present documentation regarding matters that directly affect this family. She opened her briefcase and began laying documents on the coffee table. Photographs of me on the bridge of the USS Theodore Roosevelt, official Navy commendations, newspaper clippings about operations I had commanded, a framed photograph of me with the Secretary of the Navy. My family gathered around the table like witnesses at an accident scene, unable to look away from evidence of their own blindness. This is from when Admiral Mercer assumed command of Carrier Strike Group 11, Margaret explained, holding up a photograph. The USS Theodore Roosevelt and its accompanying vessels. She was the youngest woman in Navy history to hold such a command. Aunt Patricia picked up a newspaper clipping with trembling hands. The headline read, Admiral Mercer leads humanitarian response to Pacific tsunami. This was 3 years ago, Patricia said slowly. I remember reading about this. The Navy saved thousands of lives. She looked at me. That was you. My command, yes. We deployed within 48 hours and remained for 6 weeks. My sailors saved over 4,000 people. Bradley stared at the documents as if written in a foreign language. Sophia had covered her mouth, tears forming. And my father stood frozen, his face a battlefield of emotions I had never seen. This is not possible, he said finally. I would have known. I told you, I called when I graduated from the academy. You hung up. I called when I received my first command. You said driving boats was not a real accomplishment. I stopped calling after that. But an admiral, that is not something you can hide. I was not hiding it. I was simply not reporting to people who did not want to hear. There is a difference. Margaret cleared her throat. There is another matter. The reason Admiral Mercer requested my presence tonight. She withdrew another set of documents, legal papers, trust records, financial statements spanning 4 years. This concerns Mrs. Alina Mercer and the funding of her care at Sunrise Memory Facility. My father stepped forward. That is private family business. Indeed, which is why the family should know the facts. Margaret laid out documents carefully. 4 years ago, the facility contacted the family regarding increased costs. Mrs. Mercer required 24-hour specialized attention. The total exceeded $12,000 monthly. I know all this, my father interrupted. I negotiated a payment plan. You accepted a reduced bill. You negotiated nothing. Margaret's voice carried an unmistakable edge. The reduced bill was made possible by an anonymous trust covering the difference. That trust has paid approximately $420,000 over 4 years. The number hit the room like a physical force. That is impossible, Diane breathed. Who would do that? Margaret turned to me. Admiral. I stepped forward. I established the trust in 2020 when I learned grandmother's care was being compromised. The family was discussing moving her to a lower quality facility. I could not allow that. You, my father's voice cracked. You have been paying this whole time. Every month, the best doctors, therapists, around-the-clock attention. The facility has my personal number. I visit whenever leave permits, at least once a month for 4 years. I watched my father's carefully constructed reality crumble. For 15 years, he had told everyone I was a failure. All that time, I had been rising through the ranks while quietly ensuring his mother wanted for nothing. The trust is fully funded through grandmother's natural life expectancy, Margaret continued. Additionally, Admiral Mercer has established legal protections for this home. It cannot be sold without explicit consent while Mrs. Mercer lives. You cannot do that, Bradley said, lawyer instincts engaging. That property is part of the family estate. Grandmother signed the documents herself 3 years ago during a lucid period. She understood exactly what she was signing. She wanted to ensure her home would not be sold to pay for care she believed family should provide out of love. She would not have agreed without telling us. She told me you would say that. She also told me none of you had visited her in over 6 months when she signed those papers. I was the only one who came. The accusation hung undeniable. Siblings exchanged guilty glances. My aunt found the carpet fascinating. I did not come for revenge, I said, addressing the room. I did not come to humiliate anyone. I came because grandmother's home was threatened and needed protection. I came because someone was taking credit for financial support they did not provide. I let my gaze rest on each face. Aunt Patricia, who whispered about my failures. Bradley, who mocked my career. Sophia, silent during my exclusion. Deanne, who made me feel unwelcome. And my father, who spent 25 years convincing me I was worthless. The little girl who sat in corners at Christmas grew up. She became someone who commands thousands of sailors, trusted with billion-dollar vessels and international operations. She did it without your approval, without support, without a single word of encouragement. A tear escaped down my cheek. I did not wipe it away. But she never forgot her grandmother, the one person who looked at her with love, so she made sure grandmother would be protected even without credit. Because that is what love does. It shows up. It provides. It protects. The room was silent. Even the fire seemed to have stopped crackling. A small voice broke the stillness. My cousin's daughter tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy," she whispered loudly, "Aunt Elaine is a real admiral." Her mother nodded, too stunned to speak. The little girl smiled. "That is so cool. Can I see your hat?" The innocent request shattered the tension. Nervous laughs rippled through the room. I knelt down and offered my cover, letting her examine the gold insignia. "This is really yours." "It really is." "Did you have to be very brave?" I smiled, thinking of storms and command weight. "Sometimes. Mostly I just had to work hard and never give up." She nodded seriously. Then she looked at me with pure honesty only children possess. "I am glad you came to Christmas, Aunt Elaine, even if no one got you a present." I hugged her gently. "Thank you, sweetheart. That might be the best gift I have ever received at this house." I rose from my kneel with the little girl still examining my cover. Around me, the room had begun to stir, initial shock giving way to chaos. Some family members looked away when I met their eyes. Others stared openly, trying to reconcile the Admiral with the failure they had been told about. My father was the first to speak, his voice rough, almost strangled. "This is some kind of joke." He set down his bourbon glass with a sharp click. "You hired actors, rented a costume. This is not real." Lieutenant Commander Torres stiffened, but a slight shake of my head kept him silent. "It is not a costume, Dad. I earned the right to wear it through 18 years of service." "Then why hide it? Why keep this secret?" I did not hide it. I stopped reporting to people who did not want to hear. Every time I shared an accomplishment, you dismissed it. Every promotion, every commendation. You called it playing soldier. You made clear that nothing I did in uniform would ever matter to you. I was trying to push you toward something better, something more prestigious. More prestigious than commanding an aircraft carrier. I allowed a slight edge into my voice. More prestigious than leading joint naval operations. What would have satisfied you? A law degree like Bradley? Would that have been enough, or would you have found new ways to diminish that too? He opened his mouth, then closed it. For possibly the first time, my father had nothing to say. Diane stepped into the silence, social instincts overriding shock. Well, this is certainly unexpected. We always knew you were independent. I suppose we should have guessed you would do something remarkable. Should you have? Because I remember different stories. Christmases where I received hand-me-downs while Bradley and Sophia opened designer gifts. A dinner where you forgot my place at the table. Being excluded from photographs, from vacations, from every celebration. Her smile faltered. Those were misunderstandings. You were always deployed. It was difficult to include you. I was not here because I was serving my country, saving lives, doing work that mattered. And every time I came home, you made sure I knew I did not belong. Diane's mask cracked. She looked to my father for support, but he was staring at the documents, his face ashen. Bradley stepped forward, squaring his shoulders like a junior lawyer facing down an admiral. Look, Elaine, this is all very dramatic. Congratulations on your career. But let us talk about the real issue. You had no right to interfere with grandmother's estate. Those documents you convinced her to sign could be considered undue influence. Could they? Cases where a family member secretly pays 4 years of medical care. Where they establish a trust ensuring their grandmother wants for nothing. Where the supposedly influenced party was competent, willing, and grateful. She has dementia. Her judgment was compromised. Her judgment was fine when she signed those papers. I have medical evaluations documenting her lucidity. Witnesses including nurses and the facility administrator. Would you like to explain to a judge why you are overturning your grandmother's wishes to sell her home? Bradley reddened. I am protecting family interests. No, you are protecting your inheritance. There is a significant difference. Torres stepped forward, voice respectful but firm. If I may, Admiral, challenging these documents would bring scrutiny to the family's financial dealings, including discrepancies between actual costs and amounts Mr. Richard Mercer claimed to be paying. Bradley looked at our father, who had gone paler still. You claimed credit for grandmother's bills, I said quietly. Told the family you bore the burden, but the bills you received were a fraction of actual costs because I covered the rest. Would you like to explain that? Explain how you plan to sell her home and distribute proceeds as if you earned them. I did not know. My father's voice was barely audible. I thought the facility reduced rates, thought insurance covered more. You thought what was convenient. You never questioned because questioning required effort, required actually paying attention to your mother's care instead of just writing checks and congratulating yourself. The room went silent again. Even Bradley seemed out of arguments. Sophia stood near the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Elaine, her voice was small, nothing like the confident doctor she was. I am so sorry. I turned to my sister. Sorry for what specifically? For all of it, never defending you, letting them say those things. I knew it was wrong. I knew you did not deserve it, but staying quiet was easier. Easier to keep my place by not making waves. Yes, easier for you, not for me. She flinched, but I did not soften the words. Sophia had watched me be humiliated for 15 years and said nothing. Her silence was its own cruelty. I do not expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I see it now, what we did to you. I considered her carefully. On a ship in crisis, I had learned to assess people quickly. Sophia was genuinely remorseful, but remorse was not absolution. I appreciate you saying that, but words are easy. You could have spoken up any time in 15 years, could have visited grandmother when she was alone. Could have sent a single message acknowledging my career was real. You chose not to. Now you are sorry because truth came out, not because you found courage to tell it yourself. She nodded slowly. You are right, I have no excuse. No, you do not. I turned to Aunt Patricia, who had retreated to the far corner hoping to escape notice. The family gossip for as long as I could remember. Aunt Patricia, anything you would like to say? She clutched her pearls. I always said you were special, Elaine. I always believed in you. Did you? I remember clearly what you whispered at every gathering, telling cousins I failed out of the academy when I graduated top of class, saying I was unstable, difficult, a disappointment. None of it was true. You spread those lies anyway because they made better stories. Your father told me those things. I was just repeating what he said. And you never questioned them, never wondered why his version did not match reality. Or did you simply enjoy having someone to look down on? Patricia had no answer. She stared at the floor, social standing crumbling around her. I surveyed the room one final time. 25 people who had spent 15 years treating me as nothing. Some looked ashamed, some angry, some desperately calculating how this changed their position in the family hierarchy. But I was done calculating, done seeking approval from people who never intended to give it. I want to be clear. I did not reveal this to make you feel guilty or demand apologies. I revealed it because grandmother deserves truth spoken in her defense, and because I am finished pretending to be less than I am to make you comfortable. I retrieved my cover from the little girl, who handed it back reluctantly. I placed it on my head, adjusting to the perfect angle, feeling the last piece of armor slide into place. 15 Christmases of silence taught me that actions speak louder than wrapped packages. You did not want to hear my words, so I let my actions speak. They are speaking now. My father took a step toward me, his expression shifting from shock to something more desperate. Elaine, wait. We can move past this. We can start over. Family is family, after all. I turned to face him fully. You are right about one thing, Dad. Family is family, which is exactly why I made sure grandmother is taken care of. But family is also who shows up, who provides without being asked, who protects without expecting credit. I showed up, he protested weakly. When was the last time you visited grandmother at the facility? When was the last time you sat with her, held her hand, let her know she was not alone? He could not answer. We both knew he could not answer. I showed up for 15 years, I continued. Showed up to Christmases where I received nothing. Showed up to dinners where I had no place at the table. Showed up hoping that someday, somehow, you might see me for who I actually was instead of who you decided I should be. Elaine. I stopped hoping a long time ago, Dad, but I never stopped showing up. Not for you, for grandmother, for the memory of the woman who loved me when no one else would. That is the difference between us. That is the difference you never understood. I turned away from my father and addressed the room one final time. I am going to visit grandmother now. She should not spend Christmas Eve alone while her family argues about her estate. Margaret gathered the documents, sliding them back into her briefcase. Tors moved toward the door. The Navy personnel who had waited outside entered briefly to retrieve the garment bag holding my civilian clothes. Elaine, please. My father's voice had taken on a tone I had never heard from him before, something close to pleading. Stay, we can talk about this. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the scene. The magnificent Christmas tree surrounded by opened gifts. The family frozen in various states of shock. The fire crackling in a house that had never truly been warm to me. There is nothing to work out, Dad. I came to protect grandmother and stop a lie. Both are done now. But what about us? What about the family? The family made their choices a long time ago. So did I. I chose to serve something greater than myself. I chose to protect people who needed me. I chose to build a life where my value was determined by actions, not your approval. I walked toward the front door, my officers falling into step behind me. The family parted before us like water before the bow of a ship. David, the cousin's husband who had served, stepped forward and saluted. "Admiral, it was an honor to meet you properly." I returned his salute. "Thank you for your service, David." His eyes glistened. "I wish I had known, would have told them they were wrong about you." "You did not know. That is the point. The people who should have known chose not to." The little girl ran up before I could reach the door. "Aunt Elaine, will you come back next Christmas?" I knelt to her level. "I do not know, sweetheart, but remember something. You can be anything when you grow up. If anyone ever makes you feel small or worthless, remember me. Remember that the Aunt Nobody believed in grew up to command aircraft carriers. Remember that the girl who received no gifts became someone who saved thousands of lives." She nodded solemnly. "I want to be an astronaut." "Then be an astronaut. Study hard, work harder, and never let anyone tell you your dreams are too big." I hugged her, then rose and continued toward the door. The cold December air rushed in, carrying snowflakes that sparkled in the porch light. I was halfway down the steps when footsteps followed. Sophia, her coat hastily thrown over her shoulders, face streaked with tears. "Elaine, wait, please." I paused but did not move back. "What is it?" "I want to come with you, to see grandmother. I know I do not deserve to, but I want to try, to start showing up." I studied her face, searching for manipulation. I saw only exhaustion and something like genuine remorse. "It is a long drive." "I do not care. I should have been visiting all along. I was complicit. I was a coward. But I do not want to be that person anymore." I thought about refusing. One night of guilt did not erase 15 years. But then I thought about grandmother, alone in her room. Revenge was not my purpose. Protection was. "Get in the car, but understand this is about her, not about us. You sit with her, hold her hand, tell her you love her. No excuses, no making this about your guilt." "I understand, thank you." We walked toward the SUV. Before entering, I took one last look at the house. My father stood in the doorway, framed by warm light and falling snow. He looked smaller somehow. For 25 years, he had loomed over my life like a shadow. Now he was just an old man watching his daughter leave. Something shifted in my chest. Not forgiveness, not quite, but something like release. The desperate need to prove myself to someone who would never be satisfied began to lift. I did not need his approval anymore. I never had. I raised my hand in acknowledgement. Then I turned and slid into the SUV. "To the facility, ma'am," Tors asked. "To the facility." The car pulled away, and I watched through the rear window as grandmother's house grew smaller. The family would be talking for hours, reconstructing memories, revising narratives. Let them talk. Their words no longer had power over me. Sophia sat quietly beside me. I do not know what to say to her. I have not visited in almost a year. "You do not have to say much, just be present. Hold her hand. Tell her she is loved. That is what she needs." "Did she recognize you during your visits?" Sometimes she called me Catherine, my mother's name, but she always smiled when I walked in. The connection is still there, even when memory is not. Love does not require recognition. It just requires presence. The snow fell heavier. When the facility came into view, I felt a familiar sense of homecoming. The staff recognized me immediately. "Admiral Mercer, Merry Christmas. Mrs. Aliner is in her room." "Thank you, Maria. This is my sister, Sophia." Maria smiled warmly. "She will be happy to have visitors on Christmas Eve." We walked down the quiet hallway. At grandmother's door, I turned to Sophia. "Ready." She took a deep breath. "No, but I'm going to do it anyway." I pushed open the door. Grandmother sat in her wheelchair by the window, watching snow fall. She turned, eyes clouded with confusion. Then she saw me, and her face transformed into the smile I had crossed oceans to see. "Catherine," she said softly, reaching out, "you came." I knelt beside her and took her hand. "Merry Christmas, grandmother. I brought someone to see you." Sophia stepped forward, tears falling. "Hi, Mom, it is Sophia. I am sorry it has been so long." Grandmother studied her, then smiled again. "Such pretty girls, my pretty girls." Sophia sobbed and knelt beside me. taking grandmother's other hand. We stayed that way as snow fell outside, 3 generations connected by touch if not by memory. I looked at my grandmother's face, peaceful in the soft light, and felt something I had not expected. Not triumph over my family, not vindication for years of mistreatment, just gratitude. Gratitude that I had been given the strength to protect her. Gratitude that despite everything, love had survived. "I love you, grandmother," I whispered. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did." She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "My brave girl," she murmured. "So proud of my brave girl." Whether she knew who I was in that moment, I could not say, but it did not matter. The words were true regardless. They had always been true. We stayed with her until she fell asleep, her hands still clasped in ours. Then Sophia and I walked back out into the Christmas Eve snow, 2 sisters who had finally found their way to the same place. "Thank you," Sophia said quietly as we reached the car, "for letting me come, for giving me this chance. Do not thank me yet. One visit does not change 15 years, but it is a start. I will do better, I promise. Show me, do not tell me." She nodded, understanding. Actions, not words. The lesson I had learned long ago. Tors held the door as I slid into the SUV. Through the window, I could see the facility's Christmas lights twinkling against the dark sky. Inside, grandmother slept peacefully, cared for, protected, loved. The little girl who sat in corners watching everyone else open presents had finally given herself the only gift that mattered. The truth, and it fit perfectly.